What occurred was unfortunate, incorrect, a gross abuse of an extended privilege, right? And it is sufficient for the speaker. I will impose a lifetime ban. If I was a speaker there and there's a sufficient evidence to satisfy my mind of the individual who did this, he would have a lifetime ban on Parliament.
Parliament is a public place. Doing the same thing with the MP sitting on her veranda or sitting in a private room and you look through a window to get it, that is wrong. That is spying. But in a public place, you're walking on the street and you're using your phone and somebody see it, you're wrong. You can't expect privacy in a public place like that.
Now, opposition St. Andrew Northeast Member of Parliament Kate Lewis-Peters demanded the Speaker of the House investigate the circumstances that led to the unauthorized publication of a video purporting to show the Member of Parliament engaging in the personal use of her cell phone for non-parliamentary business. The video taken during the January 28, 2025 sitting of the House of Representatives has drawn mixed reactions in the national community and has caused some to argue that while it may chalk up to a breach of privacy, the breach occurred in Parliament, where the rules of privacy may not be as sacred, whereas others have argued that this breach of privacy is in direct contravention with parliamentary protocol and the Speaker's inability to control the public's use of digital devices in the course of parliamentary business. Now, here to make sense of this issue are former Senate President Chester Humphrey, as well as Mr. Vincent Roberts, who is here in his personal capacity. I might add, he's a telecommunications expert. And Mr. Humphrey, I do want to begin with you, sir, because of course you have the institutional knowledge of Parliament. And let us begin by talking about sort of the evolution of Parliament from an analog to a digital footing. Now, in my day, when cell phones were not even a thing in Grenada, when I covered Parliament at York House, the Sergeant of Arms at the time, he ran a very tight ship in the public gallery. He did not tolerate interruptions, and anytime folks spoke out of turn, he got up very sternly and he said silent. In fact, I saw him on several occasions escorting people outside of Parliament from the public gallery. So let us talk about this, how the standing orders evolved from the York House days to now, taking into account that digital evolution that Parliament has to consider as well.
All right. First, Dr. Bob, let me just make a generalized point.
Yes.
As the contextual background for the issue which arose recently. First and foremost, the rapidity with which technology is evolving and developing finds us, not on just the question of Parliament, but society as a whole, lagging behind in respect of laws and regulations as to how this technology should be controlled and limited. And generally, and this is not a Grenada problem, it's a world problem. Mm-hmm. Generally, the laws tend to lag behind the evolving technology. And in respect of Parliament, which is a very traditional structure and holds fast to tradition, all parliaments, be it the parliaments of the the House of Representatives and Senate of the American Republic or the Canadian Parliament, Parliament is generally maintains a body and atmosphere of tradition, all right, and it is slow to change. Under my stewardship, that change, and the change is still slow and evolving and is necessary. For example, we made one amendment in both houses in order, and former Senator Diali would recall that because he and I were very intricately involved in that bill in the House of the Senate, even more than the House of Representatives. We were the ones who were calling for the introduction of a digital platform in the Senate. Parliament deals with a voluminous amount of paper, with bills and regulations and reports and all of that stuff. And it was becoming burdensome to get around. So you had to have a dedicated police officer outrider on a motorcycle, and he would come to your house on a Sunday, a Saturday, whatever time, to deliver this huge brown envelope packets with all kinds of documents and bills and so on.
I remember getting
And
those at the Grenadian Voice. Yes, go ahead.
right, and then there were sections that will be dropped off to the media and that kind of thing, all done
Yeah.
by a police outrider on a motorcycle. And we pressed on, and eventually we introduced a change in the standing orders, which allow for parliamentary documents to be circulated in addition to the traditional way, digitally. Right? Um, under those provisions, and within that time frame, a upgrade of how Parliament does its business was introduced, and as a result, every member of Parliament was provided with a laptop. So, as an extension of the digitalization, laptops were then provided, not personal laptops. The laptop was an instrument dedicated to each member had a laptop that was numbered. It was not his personal laptop, but he had charge of it very much in the same way as you had charge of your passport. It's not your personal document. It's a document of the state which you can use to travel. Well, somewhat in that form, but of course, as not as wide as it is. So each member in the parliament, in both houses, would have a laptop. The laptop is available for sessions, whether it's a full sitting of the house or some committee, and the laptop would be there. You can get online, and the bills are there electronically, and so on. All right. So just let me say, the standing orders are very, um, in a word, archaic, and that is not to cast any aspersion or make any condemnation. It's just the way and nature of how things are done in Parliament. But to any reasonable mind, certainly to my mind, the first of all, a stranger in the gallery is there at the pleasure of the presiding officer. All strangers, right? So while Parliament is public, and remember, it's only of recent vintage, we start to get parliamentary procedures now being televised and
And
so
live
on, and now
streamed.
it's gone
Yeah.
online and so on. So I'm telling, and but that has been a very slow process, but we are currently there. What is lagging behind are certain rules and regulations. But let's be clear. The presence of Parliament are sacred. The presiding officer has, by virtue of the Constitution, a lot of powers. Parliament itself has a lot of powers. And I have seen some arguments between lawyers as to whether or not what, to my mind, amount to spying on a member of Parliament. I want to put it bluntly. I'm not sugarcoating it. If you are extended the privilege as a journalist, whether you're a photojournalist, whether you are a print journalist, or whether you are a visual journalist, but someone who comes in there to take footage to cover a parliamentary story. And that certainly would be the mens rea of a presiding officer who, because you can't just walk off the street and come into parliament with a camera and start filming. You have to get the permission of the speaker, and you have to be a registered media person. There's a register of media persons, and every new session of parliament, right? Not sitting, but every new parliament, those applications are renewed. And unless there's something untoward where a speaker might feel a particular media person may have gone out of line, you're automatically granted. But I have had cause to restrict certain media people during my tenure in Parliament, and I've spent close to 30 years in the Parliament. I believe myself and Dr. Mitchell are the longest serving parliamentarians alive in this country today. And I've gone through different speakers, I've gone through different periods and different eras. Now, a search of the House of Representatives standing orders would not see anything specific to what I would call a visual journalist, but certainly a visual journalist who would have entered the parliament on the privilege extended him by the speaker would never, to my mind, allow such a person to spy. And that is what occurred. There was a spying, and that's absolutely wrong, intolerable, and should be rejected by all right thinking persons. No, I've heard the argument that a guy burgled my house, right? While I was not there. He committed a burglary. And while he came in searching and stealing things, he discovered a firearm, which subsequently became known as an illegal firearm. Is there an argument that the burglar didn't commit a burglarious act? Because I've heard those stretched arguments in the legal context, right? And all of them tend to be politically favored. And I suspect the persons who sought or gave that opinion would be those who are sympathetic maybe to the government side. And those who on the other side will have an opposing view. But ask yourself for a moment, if that spying occurred in this parliament and the spying was done on the prime minister, it is absolutely unacceptable conduct. And the least that the speaker can do is to trigger an inquiry. And I may dare say, the speaker can extend a ban. Notwithstanding, it's not in the standing orders. The speaker can extend a ban because the Constitution allows the Parliament to construct its own rules. Remember the separation of powers. We are all co-equal arms. And Parliament as a legislative arm, the Speaker is the person in charge. And when I go to the standing orders, let me read for you standing orders on page 4. It is standing order 5, subsections 4, 5, and 6. I want to read to you in its entirety what it says, because the Speaker has the powers. And I do believe, although I don't know the Speaker personally, but I cannot see a Speaker in granting permission for a visual journalist, as I described one, to enter the Parliament for the purpose of spying. So that is what it amounted to. I'm not interested in what was on the parliamentarian cell phone. That's a different issue. But the cell phone is a private personal instrument, right? And there is protection of privacy. I can't just steal your cell phone and go into it. That's the criminal law deals with that. I can't intercept a cell phone message. Criminal law deals with that. It's an offense, from what I've been told by lawyers. It's an offense in law. And therefore, to use a camera to spy on a member of parliament, well, the prime minister himself made it clear. He separated himself and he separated his government, right? So at least at a modicum, while the act was not an act personally injurious to the government side, the prime minister, who is an outstanding attorney, a business attorney, but attorney nonetheless, right, has made it clear that he does not accept that kind of behavior. The leader of the opposition now, the Honorable Emlyn Pear, well, she's not yet leader, but is on her way there. The statements
the leader
that
of
she
the
made
opposition elect, yes.
to be elect.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
elect, yes. Although it's not really an election,
Semantics.
it's based on
Yes.
it's based on the perception of the Governor General.
Yes.
Who the Governor General perceives will enjoy the majority support amongst members who are not on the government side.
Yes.
But so for all purposes, this.
You're about to
Let me
quote the
just read
standing
you the
orders, and
standing
then we'll
orders.
get Mr. Roberts.
Right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, sections 4, 5, and 6. 4. The Speaker in the House and the Chairman in committee shall have power to regulate the conduct of business in all matters not provided for in these standing orders. And it must be inappropriate for a stranger to be spying on a member of parliament and having spied to publish what he has stolen. That must be improper. And all this talk about parliament being a private place is just utter rubbish. Subsection 5. The Speaker shall be responsible for the management and general administration of the House. And if he has that responsibility, and I'm saying to you, I'm saying, notice the stance of the Prime Minister on the opposite side. Notice the position of the member of the NNP, Honorable Emlyn Perry, when she spoke, and she spoke with passion, and she is absolutely correct. And Section 6 says, the decision in all cases for which the standing orders do not provide shall be within the discretion of the Speaker, and the Speaker shall not be open to challenge. The Speaker can effect a ban, because I submit, I'll be shocked if when the Speaker gave permission for a visual journalist to enter the Parliament, he was doing so on understanding that he was facilitating spying. I will have a heart attack if that emerges. I don't believe it will emerge, because I don't think in my wildest imagination that the Speaker had any such intent. The Speaker intention is the intention of all the presiding officers I know and of myself. That Parliament conducts the business of the people, and that the people should have some knowledge of what's happening.
Yeah.
That does not extend to entering into a private instrument of the individual.
Yes.
Does not.
Yes, Mr. Humphrey.
Right? And any arguments. So let's be clear. My position is simple.
Yes.
Sorry.
Stick a pin. I want to get to Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, of course, this is your very first time on the Bub Report. I've had both of your other siblings on the Bub Report, so welcome to the program. I don't know if you watch the program or not, but it's a pleasure having you here, and we're glad to have you. We hope to have you back again at some point.
Right. Thank you very much, and it is indeed a privilege to be on such esteemed and highly regarded program.
Yes.
Dr. Bob, the subject matter that we're looking at today deals with a specific case of recording someone's, people say, data. Now, I will look, and I've been looking at the whole issue from the point of view of data protection and how data is handled. Now, the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union is considered to be the gold standard. And throughout the world, it is used to develop all local laws regarding to data protection. Now, the GDPR, as it is called, specifically looked at three things. 1, personal data. 2, the processing of data. And 3, what is called data controllers. Now, one may ask, what is the relevance to this case? First of all, what is personal data? Personal data is any data which can be used to identify a natural person. And in data law, they are referred to as the data subject. So we ask, was the information on the phone personal data? It was not. 2, processing includes collecting, recording, storage, and dissemination of data. Was data circulated? Yes. The information was recorded. But I go back to 1, it was not personal data. 3, data collectors and processors. They are responsible for the handling of data and how it is handled and whether it complies with the GDPR principles. As I said, in this case, showing MPs Kate Lewis' phone activity, it does not qualify as personal data. And 2, it merely shows her browsing a website without identifying any private details, like her credit card information and so on. The setting where this is done is a public parliamentary session. And I will not challenge Senator Humphrey's comments on that, bearing in mind, 1, not just because he has been there for many years, but because along the many years, he has developed an expertise and he de facto is an authority in that field. So I will not be speaking on what he has said. However, if we should look at how the data was handled and all of that, it brings to the fore the question, was there a reasonable expectation of privacy? And there we go into another area which is linked with data protection and where the data comes from. Under the expectation of privacy in data law, it asks the question, 1, is it the expectation of the person that in that situation they would have what they call a normal expectation of privacy? This is a subjective expectation of privacy we're talking about. The second one is the objective or reasonable expectation of privacy. Would a reasonable person in the same situation expect privacy? Now, for an expectation of privacy to be legally valid, it must pass both the objective and the subjective test. And in this situation, it begs the question, would a normal person expect privacy in that setting? And we bring in where Senator Humphrey says that, in Parliament, the presiding officer, president or speaker, is the one who would rule on these issues. Now, in preparing for this, I looked at the standing orders. And as the senator says, it says that the members can use their device to present and so on. But it does not really address the issue, not of the journalists or the member, but what about the visitors who are referred to, I think the senator said, as strangers? What happens if a visitor comes in with their device? And we know now that most devices have multiple capabilities. You can use it to make your notes if you're interested in something. You can use it to research while a presentation is being made. You can use it to photograph. Are the members of the parliament expecting privacy when all of this is happening? So not looking at it from a political point of view, but looking at it from a data processing and the general data protection regulation, which, although it comes from the EU, it is applicable in all countries, as long as you're dealing with European citizens. Mm-hmm. Whether the members of parliament expect privacy in that setting.
Mm-hmm. Senator, I want you to pick up on what Mr. Roberts articulated here. He said in the context of parliament, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. But in my understanding of parliament, there is also something called parliamentary privilege. So there are things that members of parliament can do inside of the house that if they were to do it outside of the house, there would be consequences for that. So please pick up on what he just articulated here.
Look, in the last few minutes, I've been listening to what I describe as pure obfuscation. I'm getting around the issue in order to make a political point of correctness. All right, and I don't have much appetite for harboring those nefarious intentions. We don't have sight of the European law, which was spoken of. We don't know the context of those laws. We don't know what the law says. What we have is an individual presentation and the interpretation of the law. And the issue goes before what is being published. Saying to you, I am certain, right? And maybe you in the media can ask the speaker, but I'm certain when the speaker gave permission for a visual journalist to enter the chamber to cover the parliament, the speaker could not have had in mind that he was allowing one to spy,
Well,
right?
Senator,
A
I don't want
cell
to cut you
phone.
off.
Let me
No,
start. Let me,
yeah, well,
well, cut me off.
because there are also no, there are allegations that this might not have been a visual journalist. This might have been just somebody in the gallery with a cell phone. I
No,
could
no.
go in Parliament Gallery and sit down and start recording
Well,
with my cell
well,
phone.
I was in Parliament during the debate, and I saw a gentleman with a very powerful lens camera, and it's one of those standard size cameras, but it can also do videos. I saw him moving around the Parliament. And I just assumed that he would have had permission because the clerk and the support, the orderly, um, the sergeant of arms and others would have stopped him because you're not allowed. That is just not allowed in the parliament,
Yeah.
especially in a non-ceremonial occasion. If you had a ceremonial occasion, there's usually a photo opportunity time,
Mhm.
right? But as I said, the very fact, remember, remember, a cell phone is a private instrument unless that cell phone was issued to you by the state. And when I was speaker, after many, many years, the latter part of my speakership, I was provided with a phone by the government as speaker. Now, that's not a private phone, that's a government phone. But even there, the issue of privacy must apply. So it is not what the fellow discovered. The fact is, he entered the member of parliament's phone without her permission or knowledge, harvested information. And I'm not going to spend time to define whether that is data and what data means and so on. That's obfuscation. The fact is, and everybody knows, simply, the population knows, simply put, that what occurred, and as I'm saying, in the public domain, it depends on which side of the political fence you are at. So in the
Yeah.
public domain, if you are on the government side, then the guy did nothing wrong, and I hear when they were shopping, this is a public space, that kind of argument. On the other side, and I'm saying the fact that the prime minister, the leader of the government, stood up and made it clear that he, first of all, as prime minister, minister of national security, the one overall in charge of the entire administration of the state, in the executive arm of business, that he and his party uh, disassociate themselves from that act. So, I mean, that says it all. And the point I'm making here is what now has to happen, to my mind, is that the speaker, at a minimum, must commission an inquiry to determine who was most likely to have harvested this information and then to take the appropriate action. If I was currently the presiding officer, I would immediately suspend all from the House until that investigation occurs. And I would then set strict rules for the Speaker. And the Constitution lays it out. The Constitution in Section 50 says, and I read, subject to the provisions of this Constitution, each House of Parliament may regulate its own procedure and may in particular make rules for the orderly conduct of its proceedings. Right? And then it goes on to three. Parliament may, for the purpose of the orderly and effective discharge of the business of the Senate and the House of Representatives, makes provisions for the powers, privileges, and immunities of the houses and the committees and the members thereof. And I read you earlier the powers that the presiding officer has in this particular case in the House of Representatives. Right? What occurred was unfortunate, incorrect, a gross abuse of an extended privilege, right? And it is sufficient for the speaker. I will impose a lifetime ban. If I was a speaker there and there's a sufficient evidence to satisfy my mind of the individual who did this, he would have a lifetime ban on Parliament. And it would have mattered not to me whether or not the acts were done against the then ruling party, the NNP, or the current ruling party, the NDC. It matters not, because the integrity of the Parliament, which must be reflected through the conduct of the Speaker, is at stake. Right? So I think the least that the Speaker can do in order to preserve his own integrity is to commission immediately an inquiry, which must report to him, the Speaker, right? And it must involve the police. That inquiry must involve the police, because from the information I have from other legal sources, there seem to be a criminal breach. No, law is not exact until appeal courts say it is.
Mhm.
So you will find on any matter
Yeah.
as many opinions as there are opinions opposed. Until a final court says, this is it, then this is it. And
Mhm.
in recent times, the American Supreme Court has taught us that there's no finality in law, because they are reversing all the issues which we thought was settled law and all the abortion issues and things
Under
until
stare
they find out.
decisis and whatnot. Yes, but
Right.
yeah.
So,
But
I just make this point. What happened is indefensible, and I've not heard any argument that satisfies me.
mhm.
Right?
Now,
And certainly
yes.
there has been no argument that satisfied the Prime Minister. I don't know if he have a second wind of it. And when the Honorable Evelyn Pearce spoke, she was, in my mind, absolutely correct. And I believe an inquiry should be underway immediately.
Mhm. Mr. Roberts, this is what you said in an opinion piece that you penned on this. You said the call, and I'm quoting you now, quote, the call for a ban is disproportionate unless a clear rule was violated and a severe security breach occurred. And then you go on to say speaker's role, quote, the speaker has the authority to determine whether an investigation is warranted, but should focus on whether there was an improper breach of parliamentary decorum rather than an alleged privacy violation, unquote. Mr. Roberts, I want you to pick up on both points that you made there.
Well, very simple, that the speaker is the person in charge. And if he wants to, it is up to him. The speaker, based on the standing orders, is the one to determine one way or the other if there should be an investigation. But Dr. Bob, I want to go back and address something here. The General Data Protection Regulation has influenced privacy and data protection worldwide. And even if someone is unfamiliar with it, that does not mean it is any less applicable or any less relevant. Not knowing about it has nothing to do with the horse's flesh. The point is that today, globally, the General Data Protection Regulation is the standard used. So when one says that I don't know about it and it is obfuscation and all of that, that is irrelevant. The issue is that everything now, all data and how it is handled, is looked at through the lens of the General Data Protection Regulation. And anyone saying they're not familiar with it, sorry, you're behind time. Because we even have a General Data Protection Regulation in Grenada based on the EU gold standard. Mm-hmm. So anything, this whole issue, Parliament could say what they want. The presiding officer in either of the houses can make their decision and make their rules. It will be, in my opinion, beyond whatever it is to ban this person, even for a period. First of all, you have to find out what the whole issue of the expectation of privacy. How can you be sitting in the public, the people's public parliament? It is being televised. everything that you're saying, as the senator said, you're issued with a government device. You're using your personal device, and the information is not even personal data. So what is the issue? If the information showed the credit card details, the health status, and so on, of course, that would be a breach.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, yeah, and you're speaking of the use of personal data. Again, information has come to us that this practice of using personal devices on Parliament's time is universal. It's not only, it does not only happen in the context of what that opposition member was caught doing at the time, but my understanding is that there are members of Parliament, and I'm not going to again. You know, implicate, again, as a journalist, I hold confidentiality to the highest esteem here, but there are allegations that others have been watching movies and doing other things while in Parliament as well, on the other side. So,
Yeah, Dr. Bob, if I may just
yes,
intervene on that,
yes, Mr.
if I should
Humphrey,
intervene on that point,
yes.
I mean, I don't buy the argument that two wrongs make a right. Two
And
wrongs
I'm
just
not saying
equal to
that
two
either.
wrongs.
Yes.
No, but you seem to be suggesting that others are doing it. And I'm making, for example, I would openly admit that during my years as sitting in Parliament, there are times when I have immediately on leaving Parliament to go to sign a collective agreement. And the collective agreement is being prepared by the office. They email it to me. And while in parliamentary proceedings, I'm reading my thing and following the parliamentary proceedings on the phone to give my office the go ahead to prepare the contract, to bring it up for me so I could go to the workplace to sign it. I mean, this is not directly parliament business, but the instrument is a private instrument. And to enter that instrument requires some permission. This is a private instrument. Yes, you're in a private place. Yes, you're in a public place. As I tell you, the guy who breaks my house, burgles my house and steals my firearm, can't use the fact that he found an illegal firearm as defense against burglary. This is a private instrument belonging to me. Whatever comes here is mine. When the speaker gave permission for that individual to come into the chamber, the speaker could not have been contemplating to allow that individual to spy. And that's the conduct I'm addressing. Spying on the members of parliament, in my view, is unacceptable conduct. And I don't care. I don't care what you manufacture to give it a face of correctness. Now we are saying we must now, the speaker must now judge whether or not the activity. If I whisper something to my parliamentary colleague on the other side, I mean, it may not necessarily be about the bill. I mean, that's incorrect. What would be incorrect? Is it the whisper disturbs the proceedings? The whisper itself is not incorrect, but it's the extent to which the behavior disturbs the proceedings. And I am saying in the parliamentary chamber, notwithstanding that parliament is a public place, there are strict regulations. You cannot enter parliament in a short pants. You could walk on the beach in a short pants. You cannot enter a government ministry armless and with all your visible attire exposing all your privacy. And it's a public place. You could do that on the beach. So the point I'm addressing is the fact that this individual entered without permission and knowledge in a mischievous intent and published it. And that must be incorrect.
If that was in her veranda,
So all of this,
not in the parliament.
Mr.
All over the place,
Public
it's really
place.
meant to divert.
Mr. Roberts,
Yeah.
Mr. Roberts, go ahead, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I said the parliament is a public place. Doing the same thing with the MP sitting on her veranda or sitting in a private room and you look through a window to get it, that is wrong. That is spying. But in a public place, you're walking on the street and you're using your phone and somebody see it, you're wrong. You can't expect privacy in a public place like that. In the parliament, you cannot expect the same level of privacy as in your home. Definitely not. So when you're looking at an expectation of privacy, you have to look at where it is happening. It is not the same action throughout. The location influences the expectation.
Very well, gentlemen, this is, again, such an important conversation And again, I preface this by making the point that in respect of the evolution, the digital infrastructure sometimes does not evolve. Sorry, the parliament, sometimes is not in lockstep with the technological and digital evolutions we have witnessed, which again, as you, I believe, Mr. Humphrey alluded to, comes really fast. But I do want to get to some viewer comments here. I believe Tessa is here. Of course, Tessa Sincere was a former senator, and I believe she sat on the Standing Orders Committee as well with Mr. Humphrey when he was the president of the Senate. So we have a question here from Jimmy Henry, who is saying, GDPR is enforced in all countries and or companies that does business or handle European citizen personal data. But again, as Cassandra said, Mr. Roberts, Cassandra Mitchell, that is, the European Union does not have jurisdiction over Grenada. So how is it that an EU regulation has international jurisdiction? Could you pick up on that?
Of course. Now, this is something that is debated throughout the technology industry. Why is the GDPR so widespread in its application? One, any company who deals with a European citizen, regardless of where you're located, they impose fines. So if it happens with Amazon or Alphabet or whichever one of them, the EU has the capacity to find you where you are and impose fines for breaching the citizens' data. Very often, you don't know who are their citizens. So to avoid costly fees, you apply it to all citizens in all countries. The GDPR is called the gold standard. It is what all countries model their data protection regulations on. Does that address it?
Yes. Thanks for clearing that up. Thanks for clearing that up. You're very concise. I like that. I like that. Another question here to you, Mr. Roberts. Would your position be the same had the PM been the victim of this type of behavior, which many see as an active espionage? Well, espionage. That's a very strong statement. Espionage.
Of course, any member of and on any side who expects privacy in there, I'm sorry for them. You cannot expect privacy sitting in the parliamentary chamber. Look at the design. People sitting behind and they're reading your screen. I have brought it to the attention of others. I've taken photographs of the screen and say, hey, you either get a screen protector or get some other means.
Wait, hold on. You said you have taken photographs of empty
I have
screen
seen
and
it
brought
and
it
I've
to their
taken it
attention?
and I've used it to indicate to the member that, look, your screen is visible. You need to protect it.
Did you say that to the opposition MPs as well?
I didn't see their screen. I spoke to the person individually involved.
I see.
That's not my function.
Okay. Let me bring back Mr. Humphrey here. Mr. Humphrey, you seem to be. We can. I'm not sure if Mr. Humphrey is not hearing us or seeing us. Of course, this is
I'm hearing you perfectly.
Okay, very well.
What actually happened to you? I'm on your program through my phone.
I see.
And
no
apparently
worries.
the charge ran out. Yeah.
Yes, no worries,
So
gentlemen.
this
is yes. So this is such an important conversation to have. But as Cadella Henry said earlier, let me see if I can pull this comment up. She's saying there is no win-win to this discussion. Investigation or not, we have a personal responsibility to ourselves to be mindful of where we operate in any particular setting. So that is her comment, and I think that's such an important context as well to have. But Mr. Roberts, I want to go over to you for some closing comments. But before I do, of course, you are on the National Telecommunications Regulatory Commission that speaks to the regulation of media, telecommunications, technology, and all of that in the context of Grenada. Can you quickly educate the public? Of course, you are not here Again, I just want to make this point that you're not here representing the NTRC today, but you're using your experience in another field to do so. But can you talk about what the NTRC does and what the public should know about your work?
Well, as you rightly said, I'm not here in my official capacity as the chairman of the NTRC. Now,
Yes.
the NTRC is responsible for the regulation and the monitoring, making sure citizens are protected, but just putting it in a short way, of everything in that ambit. Yeah. And I will take the opportunity quickly to say that one of our greatest concerns, and as a result, we have recently hired someone to deal with public relations. We hear a lot of people saying that the NTRC is not doing anything about the poor state of communication. But the regulation says that what the process is, you complain to your provider, who should give you a complaint number, and you should be able to follow up. And if you're dissatisfied, you report it to the NTRC. With that complaint number, we can follow up and so on. But people in Grenada, with very few exceptions, there's one specific case which has really led to a lot of new approaches. And this is a Grenadian who has been going at their provider with letters, documents, involving the NTRC, sticking to them, involving ECTEL, but few people have that stamina. Most people call into the radio program and just make a state their cause, whatever it is, but they do not follow the procedure. The NTRC is there, I would say, in summary, to protect the users of the electronic communication services in Grenada.
Yes, because of course I've had many. I have issues with some of the internet service providers when I come home to Grenada, and this is not as a JCB talking, quote unquote. I don't consider myself a JCB, by the way.
We have very few complaints. You could count it on one hand.
Yes, but it's just I'm speaking now of, again, the internet speed and given how much you pay for that service, it's something that I think it's. I'm glad you raised it. Yeah, yes, Mr. Humphrey, we're going to go over to you now, sir, for some closing comments.
Well, to get back to the core issue which we were invited to address,
yes,
I make the following points in summary. One, the conduct of spying on members of parliament is a conduct that should not be encouraged and should be nipped in the bud. It should not be given oxygen by introducing extraneous obfuscation in order to score a political point. I think that's a dangerous path to follow. The speaker has an easy job on this one because I said the prime minister has disassociated himself and his party from the incident and what happened. The Honorable Emlyn Pear and the victim involved both made very impassioned objections to what was happening. The ball now rests in the speaker's court. So it is the speaker at this stage to send a message to the Grenadian citizens, whether or not he is a speaker who wants to maintain a decorum of fairness. He wants to protect the integrity of the parliament and its precincts, right? And it is now in the speaker's hand, entirely in the speaker's hand. And at this point, both myself and Mr. Roberts are congruent. We agree with each other. So it is the speaker now. And I believe the speaker owes it to parliamentary tradition. And he owes it to all members of the House to immediately commission, if he has not done so, an inquiry. And because there may be criminal matters involved, to invite the police through a complaint to launch this inquiry plus Parliament can do its own inquiry to determine who is a suspect in this matter, and one does not need a trial. Once there is significant evidence for a reasonable mind to conclude, the Speaker has the power to act. And I pointed that out to you both under the standing orders and under the Constitution. And the rules of the House in the standing orders, I do not know that they are challengeable in a court of law. I don't know. Unless those rules breach the Constitution, then a constitutional matter may arise. But there's no constitutional matter there because the person who came in as a visual editor is there at the pleasure, journalist is there at the pleasure of the Speaker. So everything now rests on the Speaker. And the Speaker has to rescue himself from this issue. He can't go to sleep on it and pretend that it never occurred and hope that it goes away. He runs the risk of a repeat of this, not necessarily the same way, but it may happen where someone in the gallery with a cell phone records something that the Prime Minister may be listening to or his attention may be drawn to, which may not be directly related to the business of the House. Right? So that's my view. That is in the Speaker's hands. The Speakers must act. And I'm suggesting, Speaker doesn't have to take my suggestion, the way in which the Speaker should do so. All right? And in the meantime, all suspects should be debarred until evidence comes in because you can't allow a harm to continue. Right? In the meantime, all suspects, and that's the reason why you have to get bail, and depending on the nature, you're innocent, but depending on the nature of the charge, you may not be given bail at all. Right? The same principle here applies. You should not allow the harm to continue. So in the meantime, all must be suspended, right? And the Speaker must put rules to regulate the use of photo devices in the chamber. And as I say, I don't subscribe to this obscurantist thing about the Parliament, the public place, and privacy this and privacy that, and European standard and X, Y, and Z.
That can't be obscure.
Speaker has the power to act.
Can't be.
And he should do so. And that's my view. My view, the incident that occurred was unfortunate and wrong.
Yeah. Mr. Humphrey, do you have confidence in this Speaker to do what you're suggesting here? Given owing to his reputation in respect of perhaps some might say his inability to maintain decorum.
Well, in the pursuit of justice, I offer him a tabula rasa.
Tabula rasa. Okay, very well.
Yes.
Okay.
So on this one,
fair enough.
this one will determine who the Speaker is.
Mm-hmm.
I am not prepared to make a judgment on the basis of past performance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. But you would notice I've invited the Speaker, if he's listening, or people who are close to him who are listening, that he can proceed. Because the government has made it clear that it wants no association with that conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Government has made that clear. And so it's for the Speaker now, right? And the opposition has made it clear that that conduct is unacceptable. So all sides of the House, both sides of the House have spoken. So it's up to the Speaker now to protect the integrity of the House, right? To protect the solemnity of the House, to protect the internal discipline of the House, especially among strangers, to come up with such rules and to take such actions to show that the Speaker is worthy of occupying the post as Speaker. He has all the instruments and rules at his convenience. He has the Constitution, he has the standing orders.
The standing orders. Very well.
And he has the position of both sides of the House. So the Speaker must now act. And he ought not to drag his foot on this matter. Mm-hmm. The Speaker should have acted within 24 hours within 24 hours of this incident becoming known and public. Had it been me, a decision would have been made long time ago.
Yeah. Mr. Roberts, over to you,
Yes,
sir,
sir.
for some closing comments. And we do hope to have you back because, of course, we are navigating several digital minefields in this. There is so much issues around scams. I received a scam text this morning saying that I owed my tolls or something like that. And if I clicked on it, obviously I know better now around the digital literacy piece, but there is so much to navigate. So certainly we will be having you back on the program for those conversations in the future. But on this score, on parliamentary protocol, privacy, and the public interest, over to you, sir, for some closing comments.
Well, I will close as agreeing with Senator Humphrey. It is up to the presiding officer. In this case, it's the lower house. If it had it been in the other house, the same thing. The presiding officer has the authority and the wherewithal to do his investigation. It must be based, though, on proper understanding of what obtains today in terms of data and how it is handled, whether it is just general information or personal data. Thank you very much. You have a great day.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.